Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 18th of March of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And just 5 minutes ago, right before I started making this video, the negotiation process between the 47th President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, and the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, has ended. Most likely by the time you're gonna watch this video, you're gonna receive additional details. Most likely the press conference of both Putin and Trump will be finished by this moment, and you're gonna have a lot of details and information about this negotiation process, about the results. But as for now, we have just a lot of talks, a lot of rumors, a lot of projections, and of course a lot of speculations. We are waiting, everybody is waiting, everybody is expecting these press conferences, because obviously they're going to be very interesting. And obviously the 47th President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, has a lot of things to talk about. But as for now, we know for sure that both presidents were talking a lot. They were talking about the territories that Ukrainians are able to give the Russians, with the purpose to settle the conflict between Ukraine and the Russian Federation. We know for sure that Putin and Trump were talking about the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. Probably 3 weeks ago, Zelensky was planning to ask Trump to talk about this power station in the matter of exchanging process between the Russians and the Ukrainians to exchange the territory of Sudzha and Sudzha region for the nuclear power plant. But most likely today, even if Trump indeed talked about this topic, most likely he was talking about the exchange of the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant for the port infrastructure on the territory of Odessa and Odessa region. Today we had very important statement, very important article published by the New York Times. Trump may agree to the port in Odessa being handed over to Russian control. That was stated by New York Times, citing Zelensky aides. So you know that this is very interesting, because today it's not just the date of the negotiation process between Russia and the United States of America. You know that today is a very big holiday for Russians. Today they celebrate the reunification of Crimea with Russia. 11 years ago, right after the last Maidan, the population of Crimea decided to make a referendum where they decided to go back or to join once again the territory of the Russian Federation, and this took place exactly on the 18th of March 11 years ago. And you know that Trump's call to Putin exactly in this date has a very, very huge symbol for the Russians. You know, today lots of different political and military experts reported that maybe with the fact that Trump called exactly in this date, maybe most likely the President of the United States of America and the US itself will recognize the territory of Crimea as a part of the Russian Federation. I'm not sure that Trump is going to do this in exchange for nothing. Obviously he will ask something for this. As for now, we don't know for sure whether Trump was talking about this or not, but I would like to discuss this topic, let's say this holiday in the Russian Federation and Trump calls regarding this piece of news about the Russian base, military base, most likely on the territory of Odessa region. So basically this article published by the New York Times stated and tell us that Russia wants to create their own base on the territory of Odessa, as they used to have on the territory of Crimea, where the Russians still have the base. The question is that if the Russians are able to create a base on the territory of Odessa, this might be probably the perfect guarantees for Russia for the future, in case if Ukraine's in 20 years, or European Union in 10 or 20 years decide to break the agreement between Ukraine and Russia and to begin another bloody war with the Russian Federation. In this case, the Russians will have all chances to establish complete control over Odessa, as they did in Crimea. Of course, they will have 10-20,000 soldiers there, and they will always have a lot of weapons, and they will always have possibilities to make another military coup or something like this on this territory with the purpose to carry out another referendum and to reunify these territories back to the Russian Federation again. So of course, once again, all these things are just talks and rumors and different speculations that we saw almost from every single Telegram or X social network channel. As for now, nobody knows for sure what exactly both presidents were talking about, but obviously they managed to for us to be very, very excited about this question. Now let's return back to the line of combat contact. Before we go to the line of combat contact, another important thing: several statements, of course, were made by the Ukrainians today. The Ukrainians, once again, before the beginning of this negotiation process, warned Donald Trump and his administration about the red lines that Ukraine has. Several red lines. The most important red line is that Ukraine is not going to reduce their army, and nobody can force Ukraine to do this. Another important thing is that nobody can stop the Ukraine to join any, let's say, organization, international organization, or any international alliance. Nobody can do this, and these are the red lines of Ukraine. So very interesting red lines, because I'm not sure that Trump even talked about this when he had talks with Vladimir Putin. Now let's return back to the line of combat contact, and first we're going to talk about the Suja direction, where since the beginning of this morning we start receiving lots of updates that Ukrainians, the armed forces of Ukraine, carry out several attempts to break through the Russian border and to answer the settlements of Demidovka. The Ukrainians were trying to capture the settlement of Grafovka, and of course the Ukrainians made several attempts to break through the defense lines in the direction of Prelessia. As for the end of the 18th of March, according to different pro-Russian resources, including the official Telegram channel of the Group of Forces North, all those attacks from the Ukrainian side were repelled by the Russians. Ukrainians suffered significant losses and were forced to fall back. The sources are saying that the main task of the Ukrainians was to get this road, because if the Ukrainians were able to get this road, then they would be able to move further along this road using very high speed of their vehicles, and using these roads, the Ukrainians would be able to take much more territories. You know that, of course, we need to understand one important thing, and I would like to point your attention that today we got a lot of updates about these clashes, about the battle in the territory of the Belgorod region, but the most important that most of those updates we got from pro-Russian resources. Several pro-Ukrainian resources reported, but they always noted and added very important note that according to pro-Russian resources, there were very heavy clashes in the territory of all these settlements. As for now, the Ukrainians, especially the military authorities of the armed forces of Ukraine, haven't confirmed any clashes, any attempt to attack. Later, Zelensky and the Ukrainian administration reported that that attack was fake, that there were no attack from the Ukrainian side, and that the Russians created this situation for a reason, and they wanted to use this situation in the negotiation process with Trump to break and to ruin this negotiation process in case if something went wrong. Obviously, a very interesting theory, but as for now, without any confirmations. The Russians reported that by the end of the day, several vehicles were destroyed in the area of Demidovka, several vehicles in the area of Grafovka. The Ukrainians haven't managed to demine fields, lots of vehicles and infantry were destroyed. But at the same time, we got reports that the Russian intelligence managed to discover or continue discovering and continue filming and making let's say different notes that the lots of Ukrainian soldiers were let's say recorded in the area of Kharkiv, and lots of Ukrainian forces were recorded in the area of Zolochiv. So maybe this is another territory, another area where the Ukrainians are planning to carry out another offensive operation with the purpose to break through the border. Anyway, we're gonna understand this upcoming night, because if Ukrainians indeed have plans to do this, they're gonna do this during the night between the 18th and the 19th of March of 2025. But as for the first results, as for this situation, I would like to remind you that during the first day of the Ukrainian Suja offensive operation, by the end of the first day of offensive, we got a lot of geolocations and we got a lot of videos and different updates far behind the city of Suja. So we can say that the Ukrainian offensive operation in the Kursk region was much more successful than offensive operation in the Belgorod direction, because as for the end, we still haven't received anything that Ukrainians could even cross the border. So this is the most important thing. As for the Suja direction, the Russians continue their clearing operation. We continue receiving more and more videos, more and more different articles, pictures, photos, videos of the significant number of armored vehicles, tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, Bradleys, Kypris, Max Pros, Leopards, Abrams, everything Western production. Lots of weapons were captured and secured by the Russians and evacuated towards the mainland. So the Ukrainians suffered huge losses, and there are so much work to do for the Russians that they can't finish the clearing of Suja, and they are forced to stay there for as long as possible. Anyway, despite the situation, the Russians of course continue their offensive, but when talking about the timings and the dates and the deadline when the Russians are able to get the border, I would like to give you the answer to this question. I would like to point your attention to this video. Just take a look at the strongholds that Ukrainians managed to prepare and to create along the border with the Russians, and obviously now we understand that the borderline and the territory along the border was very, very powerfully reinforced by the Ukrainians, and I'm not even sure that the Russians are planning to assault these territories. Most likely it's better to outflank them. So this is the situation. The Ukrainians try to hold their positions, and furthermore, another important thing, that since the beginning probably of the Suja counter-offensive operation, for the first time we haven't received even a single geolocation or even a single report from neither from pro-Ukrainian, pro-Russian or neutral resources about additional changes on the ground. So which means that the Russians' offensive either was stopped completely or slowed down as much as possible. We have one geolocation, but this geolocation comes to us from the territory of Sumy, from the settlement of Basovka. In this video we can see how the Ukrainians were attacking the positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in the southwestern part of the settlement of Basovka with FPV drones. This attack took place exactly in this point, and based on this video we have adjusted this part of the village. So now we see that the Russians most likely established complete control over the western part of the settlement of Basovka, that is located on the western part, on the western bank of the river of Loknya. As for the eastern part, we still see that nothing can confirm the Russian presence there. So we see that the situation is about to be stabilized, most likely by the armed forces of Ukraine. Furthermore, we got another very important video from the same area. In this video, probably for the first time since the beginning of the special military operation, we can see the F-16 of the armed forces of Ukraine in action. Video was made from a very close distance. This video was geolocated, and this is the use of the F-16s of the armed forces of Ukraine on the territory of the Sumy region. The sources reported that Ukrainians were using this F-16 to attack the Russian positions in the area of possible Ukraine breakthrough. The Ukrainians were using bombs to attack, long-range bombs to attack the Russian positions and to break through the lines with the purpose to probably ease the progress of the armed forces of Ukraine, but we see that this didn't help the Ukrainians to achieve these results. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation on other directions, and probably the most important updates are coming today from the Konstantinovka, because from this area we got a lot of geolocations and a lot of adjustments. Today the Russians attacked the Ukrainians in the pocket between the settlement of Toretsk and the settlement of Chasiv Yar. We are talking about this pocket that includes the settlements of Alexandra Shultina, Belgorod and Delivka. The Ukrainian sources published the video how the units of the 28th Mechanized Brigade were repelling another Russian attack, and you know that there are lots of interesting details in this video. Telling the truth, the Russian Suja pipeline offensive operation started somewhere on the 8th of March of 2025, so 10 days ago, and as you can see, and I would like to point your attention that for the first time since that operation, the Russians began using their, let's say, convoys attacks with a significant number of vehicles. I don't remember any attack of this type for the previous 10 days. So either the Russians were regrouping or they were waiting when the reinforcements and reserves would be returned back from the Suja to their original destinations or original offensive lines, like the city of Toretsk, like the city of Pokrovsk, and many other places. So for the first time for the previous 10 days, the Russians resumed, let's call it like this, resume their attempts to attack with the convoys and tanks and vehicles deep inside the territory of Ukraine. Based on this video we have adjusted the map in the Russian favor. So a lot of episodes, and we have colored territories. And telling the truth, also right before I started making this video, we got another geolocation that the Russians managed to break through, and they control these fields as well. So tomorrow you're gonna have additional adjustments on the map in the Russian favor. So we see that currently the Russians are trying to attack in this pocket. They're trying to defeat the Ukrainians and to force them to fall back. Another important thing, that the Russians also managed to improve their positions on the territory of the mine of Toretsk. Today the same squad of the 28th Mechanized Brigade published video of how they were withdrawing and attacking the Russian units on the territory of this industrial zone. Based on this video we have adjusted the map. Another important video is coming from the Kliban-Bytska water reservoir. In this video we can see the reconnaissance operation and how the Russians were bombing the territory of the Ukrainian positions with FABs. So we see in this video we can see the Kliban-Bytska water reservoir itself and the southern part of the city of Konstantinovka. As you can see, everything in front of the Russians. They see everything, they control everything, and now they try to understand, try to think how to break through these positions and the city of Konstantinovka from the south. So we see that the Russians are resuming their attempts to attack the Ukrainian positions, and the most important, the Russians intensified their activities along N20 road. Today we also got another video how the Ukrainians were trying to counterattack and to restore control over the positions they lost as a result of the Russian offensive. This episode took place exactly in this area, and we see that here the Russians chose to move along N20 to attack the water reservoir of Kliban-Bytska from the south as well. So we see and we believe that in the very near future we are going to receive a lot of updates from this territory. As for the Pokrovsk direction, just two important updates, three more precisely. The first one is coming from the territory of Shevchenka. The Ukrainian sources published the video how they were after withdrawing the Russians in the eastern part of the settlement. This video confirms the Russian control for more than 50 or 70% of the settlement. The Ukrainians, as you can see, control just the northeastern part of this small town. Another important video is coming from the territory of Kotlina. Here we can see how the Ukrainians were bombing the Russians on the territory of the cemetery, and in this part of the village, based on these videos we have adjusted, based on these episodes we have adjusted the territory of Kotlina. And the most important is the first video that the Russians start publishing us from the territory of the Dnipro region. You know that most likely, and some sources reported that this video is the first video probably since the beginning of the special, maybe even operation, how the Russians were after withdrawing and attacking the forces of the armed forces of Ukraine on the territory of Dnipro. So as you can see, for the first time the Ukrainians began suffering losses in this region, which means that the Russians are planning to move further. As you can see, the Russians established complete control over the border between the city, between the Donetsk region and the region of Dnipro, which means that they're planning to advance here. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Andreevka fortified area direction. Today we got Belgorod's video how the Ukrainians counterattacked and restored control over some positions in the northwestern part of Alexandriivka. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Zaporozhye direction. As you can see, during the previous 24 hours, we got lots of articles, lots of different changes on the ground made by different mappers, and most of them are telling us that indeed the Russians managed to break through the Ukrainian positions here and to take under control or partial control the settlements of Stepovo, Mali, Shurbaki, and the village of Shurbaki itself. The Russians managed to break through the Ukrainian defense, but the question is what the Russians are going to do next, because the distances are very huge between the settlements. These Ukrainians managed to prepare probably the most layered defense exactly in this area, so it's going to be a very difficult task for the Russians if they decide to move further in the north. And I'm not even sure that they're going to do this, but most of the experts, the military experts, pro-Russian resources, claim that this is exactly the target, the main purpose of the Russians in this territory. And that's it for today. Military Summary Channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.